and welcome to Toffs&Toolers, your weekly podcast delving into the cruel, the unusual, the mad, the sad, and the fads of Victorian England. This week, we're going to be taking a little look at what it was like to be poor in Victorian England as we pay a visit to the workhouse and the asylum. Now, the workhouse was a brutal place to find yourself, where while you would be clothed, fed, and sheltered, albeit all in the most basic fashion, you would be expected to do monotonous, often back-breaking work like stone breaking or unpicking old ropes. It was an employer of last resort for those in dire need and extreme poverty.
I'm not sure I understand, though. An acquaintance of mine, Colin McDougall, has made a good deal of money from his workhouse, and it never looked like he had to pick up a pick or operated a machine in his life.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true, but if I recognise the name, he was the owner of the Andover Union Workhouse, and I'm talking about the 120 people who found themselves working for him, not about him as the owner or the profits that he got from that.
Right.
There was indeed a good deal of money to be made from workhouses, but very little of it would be found in the hands of the workers themselves, and that was by design. Before admittance to a workhouse, you'll be interviewed by a relieving officer who would assess your poverty, and only if you were poor enough and had already sold off all your possessions would you be consigned to the workhouse. So we're going to be spending some time talking about how people ended up in the workhouses, what the conditions were like, and maybe even get a Dickens reference or two in.
Please, sir, can I have some more?
No, because that would be illegal. But here at Toffs&Toolers, we can transgress a little. So yes, you can have all of that and some more, because this week we're also going to be talking about a second Victorian institution, quite literally, as we discuss asylums. So asylums were obviously where the mentally ill or the criminally insane would be sent, and the big Victorian innovation here, just like with the workhouses, was to bring all the different private institutions into state control.
Is state control of the criminally insane? It sounds optimistic.
You know, possibly it was, but it was a huge change from the previous system, which had patchy provision for mentally ill people, was frequently abused, and didn't really cover the poorer members of society, as it was mostly privately paid for. So the County Asylums Act and the wonderfully named Lunacy Act helped to change a lot of that by encouraging the building of new asylums like Broadmoor, and requiring physicians to use factual evidence when committing patients to the asylum.
Hang on, what did they use before factual evidence?
Well, we may get into this in the episode, but as you paid for people to be committed, they pretty much use wads of cash. Anyway, there is a lot to talk about this week, but before we do, I'd like to introduce my associate, Mr. Alex Sweetman, who has probably never seen the inside of a workhouse.
Hello, I've never even worked.
And Mr. Shaun Gibson, who is trying his best never to go inside one.
Yep, they don't sound good.
No. And later we'll be joined by Mr. Hugh, one-time academic and our musical talent. And behind the microphone, we also have our wonderful producers, Bella and Rob, as well as our resident capitalist, Duncan, who told us he could write, but was somehow responsible for a Dickens pun not 1 minute ago.
For shame, Duncan!
Yes, exactly.
Maybe we could have them committed.
That's the spirit. Okay, it's time to tell you all about the mad, bad, and dangerous world of workhouses and the asylum. And welcome to the show. Off we go. Let's talk about this particular subject. We do have to get through the 2 rules and 1 general guideline first.
General guideline.
Thank you very much. Major admission. The first rule is obviously there is going to be no Van Dyking on the show. So
None whatsoever. We're going to keep our vocabulary nice and fixed.
restrain from that particular behaviour. The second one is we're not talking about Jack the Ripper.
Who?
Exactly. And of course the general guideline that Charles Dickens is everywhere all at once across all Victorian time and space. You cannot avoid him.
He's in the workhouse, he's in the asylum, he's in your back garden.
Yeah, and you'd expect that in this particular episode that he's going to have something to say about the workhouses.
And I think we need to acknowledge that there may be some subjects in this episode that potentially aren't suitable for all viewers.
Exactly, Shaun. I appreciate you reminding us of that. Obviously, we're going to be using terms which are now very much out of vogue and may be considered offensive, such as the use of the word lunacy or lunatic. Yeah. Then this was core to the legislation at the time, but obviously the modern professional environment for looking after mental health care wouldn't use these terms at all. So it is important to point out that we're just looking at the historical phrases. We're not making a particular statement around them. And the subject matter itself, which is looking at treatment, especially of women within this particular environment, and the workhouses themselves might be upsetting for any number of listeners.
It's upsetting for me, and I'm here talking about it.
So with that particular caveat, I want to sort of get into the meat of the show.
Which do you want to start with? The workhouse or the asylum?
The workhouse didn't have any meat.
Quite literally, yeah. I think we need to start at the beginning, which is the Vagrancy Act. So this is
Okay.
before the Victorian era. This is 1776. And the Vagrancy Act came into play, which basically made the parish responsible for a lot of poverty in the area.
That means that if you were down on your luck, if you were unemployed, you could go to the local parish and you might get a loaf of bread to tide you over while you find some work.
It also meant that beggars could be swept up off the streets and pushed into asylums and workhouses. So there was, straight away, there was like this movement of poor people into...
Shuffling them out of sight.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And it was the duty of, I mean, this is obviously before the police force, the Metropolitan Police Force came in. But the idea of being a vagrant was in itself a criminal act. So you had the Vagrancy Act, and then you had the Poor Law and the Poor Law Amendment. And the Poor Law Amendment essentially allowed for workhouses to be instituted. And that effectively meant that being poor was then a crime.
So did the Vagrancy Act make it a criminal offence to be a vagrant?
In effect, yeah.
Wow.
Because you didn't have any sort of possessions on money, so you had to go into a workhouse. And it was that point where they introduced the idea of less eligibility. And this is an absolute critical phrase at this period.
It sounds very Victorian and the kind of thing that you could, with a reasonable amount of repute, print and feel proud of.
Well, yes, and also very much no.
Oh dear.
Less eligibility was the idea that if you were sent to a workhouse, then the conditions had to be worse than the most poorly paid person outside of the workhouse.
So worse than all of Shaun's jobs.
Worse than
Wow.
any of Shaun's jobs. And this involved literally picking apart ropes for all the threads, which could be then reused for other things, and stone breaking. So it was the most menial tasks you could possibly imagine.
But the workhouse, it fed people, it clothed them, it gave them staple employment.
Oh, bless your heart.
On paper, it sounds
On
good.
Paper, yes. Unfortunately, the food, because of less eligibility, that carried over into the food they were allowed to eat, which was essentially gruel.
I see where this
Charles
is going.
Dickens hooving into view already. And
Indeed. No second servants.
it was literally illegal to have second servings.
Sorry, it was against the
Wow.
law. If
It was meant to be, well, okay, I exaggerate a little bit. The law said you're only allowed to provide sustenance.
right.
And the way that was interpreted in the regulations of a lot of these workhouses is that you couldn't have seconds. So Oliver Twist saying, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" was a literal act of rebellion against the law.
A direct reference to say, look at this, people, this is going on.
Yeah, Dickens highlighted the fact that they were just given gruel. These children, these poor kids, because obviously what he wanted to focus on was the heartstrings, this
Yeah.
poor orphan child, and all the rest of it. But that was real. That was the idea that somebody could be criticised. It seems cartoonish now, but this was something that was known to be embedded in law. So less eligibility applied to the work, the food, and the living conditions.
Yeah.
And families were segregated. So the children,
Yes.
the men, and the women were all separated out because they certainly didn't want to what they call breed paupers.
You could have a family go in because they had no other choice. Husband and wife wouldn't see each other for months on end. They'd be separated from their children, and all to stop them breeding. That's eugenics before we
On
had a
top of
word
it-
for
I
it.
mean, it's not just brutal; it's beyond cruel. And this is what Dickens and other reformers of his time were rebelling against. Obviously, it was a very profitable business, though, so they had a lot of that. And the other people before 1845 being swept into that were the mentally ill. Because obviously, if you're out on the streets, there are lots of different issues associated with that. But you're also technically a vagrant, a beggar, so you'll get put into the poor houses as well.
One of the things that I found during the research is it would cost about 2 shillings to look after a person in the workhouse for a period of a week. It would cost 10 to look after someone in one of the asylums. So it was 5 times more economical to put people in the workhouse than it
Yeah.
was to try and give them actual care.
And it wasn't until 1845 when they established the county asylums, and they basically forced all the counties to actually have establishments where they could put the mentally ill, that was actually redressed. And yes, it was acknowledged that these are people who are victims of mental conditions, and they actually need to be looked after, and they were given a better standard of care.
Yeah.
So ironically, you had people who were poor who were actually worse off than people in prisons
Yep.
and the mentally ill. And it's just, if you can imagine how desperate you would have to be. And then obviously, if you had a family, you were being segregated as well, separated out.
Not just desperate though, because you said at the start that there was an interview. You had to have got rid of all of your worldly
Literally everything,
belongings,
yeah.
and like, are you poor enough to come to the workhouse? So it wasn't even a choice.
No, and
They could be denied it.
yeah, and it's kind of, and the interview process basically just stripped you of everything that you could possibly own. So you went in poorer than when you even started.
Because they provided you with clothes. It was effectively a uniform that you were given to show that you were one of these workhouse people. That's a social stigma as well.
Yes.
Not that you're ever going to get out of it, but people would prefer the idea of prison. Prison, the caloric intake was better. The conditions were slightly better. The work was less backbreaking, and more importantly, there was an end date where you could be free.
And you would be segregated, but if that was going to happen anyway, what have you got to lose? You may as well go to a life of crime because you're going to get more money from it. But people obviously didn't necessarily want to have a dishonest life, so they ended up in this horrible condition.
And did people generally know how bad the workhouse was going to be before they go into it?
People didn't want to do that, but it was definitely seen as like a pretty horrific option. And again, this is why reformers were sort of railed against it, because it was so extreme. This concept of less eligibility was so kind of out there.
The idea that you would actively try and make the situation worse so that people wanted employment out there, it manufactured madness with incredibly long hours, with almost no food, with very terrible living conditions so you couldn't sleep or rest, and the monotony day in, day out, doing the most menial, boring tasks. It's no wonder that people just kind of crumbled under it. The system was set up to destroy them.
I mean, you do wonder. I mean, we'll talk about some of the scandals and some of the big issues a bit later on, but it doesn't mean that the people in asylums had it easy.
No.
Because the standard of care was, shall we say, less advanced than it is today.
Yeah.
And some of the pet cures involved being spun around in a chair until you threw up evil humours. And of course, later there was a lot involving electrocution.
I'm all for a little bit of science involving electricity, but there's a time and a place.
Yeah.
Should we try it on you?
No. I'm happy to be the scientist. Like, I'm really good at writing, so I'll make the notes.
And I forgot to bring my galvanic batteries today, so apologies for that. Yes, and the frogs. So apologies that we're going to miss out on that particular experimental scene. So if you were poor or you had an obvious mental instability, so if you think about how we try to manage people with schizophrenia today, and that would have still been prevalent. It doesn't go away just because they didn't have a diagnosis for it.
They didn't have words to explain what it was or an understanding of it.
And the amount of conflict and trauma that was at that period, you still had veterans coming through from the Waterloo era, and this kind of thing in the early part of the century anyway, sort of tipping over into the sort of 1840s or so.
Yeah.
But you would have seen this kind of generational trauma being passed on through these different families, and the records of these people obviously just gone now. We don't know who they are, who went through those doors, or how many people died while they were in care. Would
you have lobotomies and such around those times?
I will have to look up specific. I mean, I'm quite squeamish when it comes to surgical things, so I'm going to leave that to yourself when you look at innovations.
Say probably.
Yeah, your series of inventions. You can look at the care of the men. It's definitely not for me, because I don't mind the sight of blood, but anything surgical.
Yeah,
and the idea of lobotomy is just like
There's no blood with a lobotomy.
I don't want to know. I really don't. Other people can perhaps research that and inform our, admiring public.
Yeah.
But it's not for
get
me.
in the comments and let us know. We'll do our own research anyway. But,
I'm more interested in Law and Order than spikes through the brain.
The way the Victorian system was set up is as an employer of last resort. It is presented as we care about everyone within this society, but the number of hoops that they made people jump through for it. It stems from that fear that if you offer people an olive branch, if you offer people a lifeline, someone's going to take advantage of it. So less eligibility would have been to try and dissuade that, but it went so far.
And there's also this double standard in that the Victorians tended to believe, certainly the middle class and upper class, tended to believe that poverty was a specific condition.
Yes.
It's almost like caste society. You were born into your station in life and you had to endure it. But you still had to adhere to these kind of standards of respectability. So you weren't allowed to be, you had to have the standard of humble poor, but you weren't allowed to be destitute. And there was no provision, there was no safety net.
Yeah,
to look after
you're
these people.
allowed to be poor, but you're not allowed to look like you're falling apart.
Yeah, it just lets the side down.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the understanding of mental health was pretty
It's slim to none.
Yeah, they recognised it as a condition. Luckily, they had moved away from tours of Bedlam kind of thing. They recognised that patients after 1845 they actually saw the mentally ill as patients rather than just a mixture of poverty and the possessed, and they stopped those tours of asylums for the very wealthy.
Yeah.
We could go out on a Sunday and look at we'll go and look at the mad people in.
We could take a walk through the park. No, let's go to Bedlam and have a little poke through the bars.
And they had this in the 1860s. They established large institutions like Broadmoor, which was specifically for the criminally insane. So they definitely sort of understood there was a difference between mental illness mental well-being as it infected an individual, and mental illness as it affected effectively quite dangerous, which does lead on to one of the major diagnoses of the period, which is hysteria.
From the Greek hystera, meaning uterus.
Which is going to give everybody a clue about who exactly it was directed against, namely half the population.
Did you know that a woman's womb can wander around her body and cause all kinds of maladies?
According to the Greeks, yes. And they came up with all sorts of ways of saying you need to have, in order to cure, which include a lack of orgasms could lead to hysteria.
Yep.
Overstimulated could lead to hysteria. Having headaches could lead to hysteria.
Basically
General
everything
depression
lead
could be
to
hysteria. And when they actually did the study after the Victorian era, they found like 3/4 of women had been diagnosed with hysteria, but there was no formal definition of what that was.
Oh no! If you decided you didn't like your wife, she was obviously hysterical for some reason,
Yes.
and it's very easy to justify it once you've made that diagnosis. You just need to find something that's a little bit eccentric, a little bit unusual, and there you go,
That's it.
definition.
And it wasn't until the 1880s when property laws were introduced, women were considered to be property of the husbands.
That was coverture, wasn't it? Before
Yes, yeah, and so when that happened, before that happened, a diagnosis of hysteria or madness and a friendly doctor could basically see your wife disappear into the asylum, and you could have a divorce, and all of that, her property, if you just happened to marry well, for example, was yours. And this is where Dickens comes in again, because this is exactly what he tried to do his wife before he made off with his mistress.
Such a Dickens.
He was a bit of a Dickens, and I think we'll talk a bit more about one particular campaigner in this area a bit later. She's a genuinely fascinating woman.
A self-taught lawyer. You have to have the most respect, but we'll get into it probably later.
So we will move on to talk about these different things and a few other examples of extremes of workhouse abuse, and at least one other character, I think, from the Asylum era that is quite interesting.
Yes, I think it's possibly one of the most redeeming stories that I've read from the time of the Asylum. So I'm looking forward to
forward to getting into that.
Yeah, getting a happy smile-ish at the end of it for a very sensitive topic.
Yeah, so we will take a break. We'll have an intermission. After a word from our sponsor, we'll obviously discuss what revolting job you have. I do hope it's not a disgusting one. It doesn't involve spikes in the
Are you
brain.
going to find out after the adverts?
Okay, great. And also, Mr. Hugh will be joining us.
Yeah, with another Dickens connection.
Exactly. We have so many this week. It's going to be fantastic. All right, everybody. We'll be back after this short word.
Can you write? Quickly? A position is available for a writer of thrilling adventures for our weekly publications. We require sensational narratives for a loyal and extremely demanding readership. Your responsibilities include violence, reversals of fortune, threats to virtue, violence, blood, and violence. At least one revelation per column inch. Originality is welcome, but momentum is essential. You'll be paid by the line. Ability to not fall asleep over a period of days, no social life, and willingness to write approximately 100,000 words a month preferred. Every instalment must end as though the reader may not survive the week. Be advised, you'll be expected to provide your own inspiration, paper, ink, an impending sense of dread, so that when the story runs out, so does your employment. Quality is commendable, quantity is required. Inquire at Harnsworth's Publishers during conventional working hours.
And welcome back. Thank you for listening to our sponsor this week. I hope you indulge in their product. I'm not sure who's actually doing. I hope it's not Fraser. I do worry about Fraser.
I hope it is Fraser, because I really want to see him succeed in his business endeavours.
Do you have shares in his business by any chance?
I refuse to answer that.
Right, okay. Welcome back to Mr. Hugh.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to finding out who What the Dickens is this week, and his association with Mr. Dickens himself, and whether Dickens is being a Dickens, of course. We will find out very shortly. And, of course, Shaun, and your endless pursuit of filthy lucre. Is it filthy this week?
It definitely is. I can
There's
smell
definitely
it
a
from
tang
here.
in the air again,
Yeah.
isn't there?
It's a very important part of the tanning industry.
Oh, dear. There could be so many parts of that which are unpleasant.
Well, they're all hitting the back of my throat.
Okay. Really? Okay. We'll get you a drink from the bar a bit later. But first, Mr. Hugh, who have you got for us this week?
Talking of the bar, you might want to give it a moment, because there's a man in there being a right Dickens, hopping around on the bar stool, squawking like a bird, trying to make us guess what he's doing. And it put me in mind of Charles Waterton. So today we're going to meet the man who makes eccentricity look like a mild hobby. If Charles Dickens was the king of the London streets, Charles Waterton is the king of the jungle. Specifically, a jungle he tried to create in the middle of Yorkshire. Waterton was a landed aristocrat, a world traveller, and credited as the creator of the world's first wildfowl sanctuary. A feat he protected by building a wall that cost £10,000. Something he could claim he could afford only as he never drank. But he's mostly remembered for being the only man in England who preferred a tree branch to a sofa. Waterton had a very awkward relationship with gravity and with shoes. Despite being a very wealthy squire, he walked everywhere barefoot, even through brambles and over rocky cliffs. He believed shoes were unnatural. When guests arrived at his estate, Walton Hall, they often couldn't find him because the 70-year-old squire was usually 40 feet up in the top of a tree, sitting in a bird's nest, mimicking the calls of all the local wildlife. If he was on the ground, his favourite prank was to hide under the hallway table and suddenly leap out and bark at a guest's shins or bite their leg like he was a dog. But his most famous weird claim to fame happened in South America. Waterton wanted to capture a live caiman, a type of crocodile, and he didn't use a trap, he used a hook and a long rope. Once the beast was hooked, Waterton didn't just pull it in, he waited until it was close to the bank, and then, in a move that sounds like a fever dream, he jumped onto the crocodile's back. He grabbed its front legs, pulled them up like a horse's bridle, and rode the thrashing predator at a terrified servant, and they dragged them both ashore. He later had the very crocodile stuffed and put in his hallway. It was the first thing you saw when you walked in. If wrestling amphibious dangers wasn't enough, Waterton also wanted to attract the aerial. He once slept with one foot hanging out of a hammock in the jungle, hoping a vampire bat would bite on his toe so he could describe the sensation for his readers. Sadly, the bat ignored him, which Waterton recorded as a personal insult. So what did Dickens think of this crocodile-riding Yorkshireman? Charles Dickens considered him so well versed on birds and beasts that he consulted Waterton when researching the habits of Grip, the pet raven in Barnaby Rudge. His mention in many of Dickens's letters, and Waterton's opinion that the ravens of England are becoming extinct, is included in the preface to Barnaby Rudge. To Dickens, Waterton was a character who had walked straight out of a novel, a man who spoke to animals as if they were people, and who treated a vampire bat bite as a fascinating scientific experiment. In an age of stiff collars and strict etiquette and social climbing, Waterton was a man who would rather scratch his back against a tree like a bear than attend a royal levee. He was the wild side of the Victorian era, a side that Dickens loved to observe from a safe, shooed distance.
That's a fascinating individual, to be certain. I love the fact that he just wandered around this vast estate without any shoes and climbed trees.
Kind of terrifying as well, though, because there's nothing more dangerous than a human bite. And if he was jumping out from underneath tables and biting people's legs, especially in the Victorian times.
Well, if you know he was coming, it's less of a challenge.
Yeah, but the whole point was a surprise.
I think it sounds like great fun.
Yeah. Speaking of fun, we're going to find out what you've been up to in your pursuit of filthy lucre this week, Shaun.
Yeah, so like I said, it's part of the tanning industry.
Is it the part involving urine?
No,
Oh,
that
well,
would be disgusting.
that's a relief. So what have you been doing?
So I've been collecting dog poop.
Oh,
So you see, when you make leather, as tanning is, you don't just skin a cow and then bake it into a purse. You have to treat the leather, stretch it out, cure it, make it supple, and allow the dyes to soak into it. And that's urine's used in the process, but you need something alkaline as well. And dog poop is a surprisingly good source of it. Not just any big brown steaming.
that'd be absurd. Yeah.
When dogs eat bones, specifically bones.
Like from the butchers.
Yeah, exactly. When they're competing with me for
Yeah.
their metabolism kind of condenses it down into like a chalky alkaline pellet, which you get like a white poop, and that's what they call the pure. So what I've been doing is called pure finding.
Right.
And that alkaline poop is then used to treat the leather, make it supple, and yeah, it's
That's it.
Sounds-
Okay.
sounds
So
great.
you've been going around finding dog poop and cherry picking the white chalky bits of it?
you don't necessarily have to cherry pick too, but yes,
Yeah.
I mean, they like it as pure as they can get it, but a little bit of adulteration is kind of okay. Not it's what I've seen some of my colleagues do is take things like mortar from building sites and mix a bit of that in to bulk it out because it looks the same. Obviously, I would never do such a thing. I'm an honest man.
I suppose it would add to the colour as well and the consistency, the texture of it.
Yeah. The chalkier and whiter, the better.
But no colour chart. You don't go around
There's
with
no
like
colour
a
chart.
no.
Very, very much a judgment game.
Yeah. If it's still steaming and wet, it's probably not what you're looking for.
So is this well paid? Are you getting good money for it?
It's reasonably well paid. You can sometimes get up to £1 a bucket.
Ooh.
Although that's becoming a bit less now. So I think
Why is there less? Are there fewer dogs around, or
no, same amount of dogs. You've got more people doing it. In fact,
Oh, you've got
more of a
competition.
supply.
More finders.
Yeah, but actually, it's strange because at the same time, you may have heard they're building a sewer system.
yes?
So the bits of the sewer that they've opened so far, people are just sweeping all this muck into the sewers. So
All the street sweepers are just getting rid of it.
Oh.
before
Yeah.
they
I know
pick
the
it.
cities have introduced orderlies. You see them around, and they're just sort of cleaning stuff away.
Yeah, they look at least respectable.
Yeah.
So mixing up all your high quality pure with the rest of the
stealing all
leavings.
my lucrative doo doo.
Well, the do. So yeah, I think. Are you in a position? So if there's going to be less competition around? Is
I
this
don't think I
building
can
up
keep
to?
this up. It's going to start paying too little to
Not sustainable.
to sustain me. Yeah.
Well, it may not be the most glamorous profession in the world, but at least it's providing a function that we can see
And
in all our
at
leather
least
goods.
you're working for yourself.
Exactly.
Yes,
Another
exactly.
win for self-employment in the Victorian era. I think we will leave it there. We'll wish you well, and hopefully, once again, a job that perhaps doesn't involve quite so many fees as it usually seems to. We'll be back with you very shortly, but thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Hugh.
you.
We'll find out from you next week who your subject of What the Dickens is, and hopefully Shaun will find out as well what you're pursuing in terms of Filthy Lucre next week as well. We'll have a quick word from our advertisers, and then we'll be back with you.
In every well-appointed household, there exist challenges best met with discretion, moments which demand refinement, circumstances in which polite society requires not denial, but intervention. Introducing the Van Vera, a triumph of modern ingenuity engineered for the discerning gentleman or lady who refuses to be ruled by gaseous eruptions from their nether regions. The Van Vera employs a patented aromatic mechanism, gently transforming what must not be discussed into something that need never be noticed. Rose for the drawing room, lavender for the parlour, bergamot should the vicar call unannounced. Compact, silent, and above all, civilised. Dignity once lost is rarely recovered. Instead, it must be preserved. The Van Vera, for those who value proprietary in all its forms. Available from Florist of London, 89 Jermyn Street. Perfumes sold separately.
Right, after that quick word, welcome back to the show. We're going to be talking a little bit more after our small intermission. Thank you so much, Shaun, for your Filthy Lucre story, which was definitely filthy. And, of course, to Mr. Hugh, who's absenting himself to presumably to discover even more Dickens-related facts.
Out on
for
the
us.
search.
Some other individual that he'll find that dotted line between Victorian society and Dickens himself in all his forms, which is marvellous. But we are going to go back to the workhouses and asylum. Now, we're back to the newspapers now.
Yeah, got a lot of stories in this
I know, it's going to be
episode.
packed, so a lot to get through here. As I peruse my own copy of News of the World, I thought I saw, it's on page 7 again. That's where all the good stories are, page 7.
Of course.
I wanted to talk about the Andover Union. So we mentioned it very briefly in the
in
but
the
I found it
intro.
very specific. I was intrigued by the comments and your relationship to Colin McDougall.
Well, I mean, he built the place in 1834, so I've known him for a while.
Yes, and he was definitely involved. And this man was a veteran. He's a veteran of Waterloo. He was a staff sergeant in the Royal Artillery, Horse Artillery, that is. So quite prestigious, and a Chelsea pensioner. Ooh. So this is a man you'd expect to be above reproach. And he was given the control of the workhouse because that was formed in the as part of this Andover Union. So you had to have a certain process involved in order to set up a workhouse.
Of course.
So 1835, the Andover Union was formed, and you have to have a union in order to actually sort of produce a workhouse, which can obviously bring in people. And it must have been doing quite well because in 1842, a clerk actually embezzled over £1,000.
Embezzling is never good, but £1,000 is a lot of money for Victorian England.
In 1840s, yes. Unfortunately, rumours started to go around about McDougall's excesses as a result of this. And in 1845, there was an investigation. There was an investigation by Thomas Whately, MP, who raised the issues after Hugh Munday, who was on the bone marrow, who was actually on the commission at the time, reported that inmates at the workhouse were eating bone marrow.
That was the Poor Law Commission, wasn't it?
Yes, so he was part of the Poor Law Commission. This was the commission that was set up to monitor all the workhouses at the time. This was escalated through the local MP. The Home Secretary got involved, to begin an investigation using a select committee. A commissioner was sent to investigate, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Parker. The Poor Law Commission actually told him to stop investigating.
So they just tried to sweep it under the rug.
Yes, he was reporting back. He was getting loads of witnesses to this particular event. The Poor Law Commission was there and that was after 11 days. It was suspended. Parker was advised to retire at this particular point, and the select committee was then set up to investigate the whole proceedings. And it turned out the Poor Law Commission was considered to be inadequate to the particular task, and these rather egregious abuses were actually found out. Essentially, what was happening. So this was one of the institutions that used to grind bones to get bone meal.
Oh, for fertilizer.
For fertilizers.
Yeah.
Because McDougall was skimming off the top, he wasn't buying food for his inmates. So they were literally found to be sucking the bone marrow out of these bones.
So
they were grinding into meal.
They were getting the bones from like farms, from butchers,
from wherever they could.
And rather than grinding them up, they were cracking them open and
they were
eating
grinding
the
them,
marrow
but
out.
they didn't have anything else to eat. They were literally starving.
You see, when you said eating bone marrow, like I've been to some nice steak restaurants that give you a full shin of bone marrow, and it's like really nice butter for your toast. I imagine it's not like that.
No.
It's just dry.
I don't think there were condiments offered. No.
These would have been putrid, rotting little bits of flesh still on them, bones that they were given.
Cleaned off, and they had to grind.
And that's all they had.
Yeah. And McDougall and his wife were accused of running it almost like a military camp or a military prison. And he was eventually fired. He lost his job. He must have made some money out of it. And that was when the commissioner was advised to retire by the Poor Law Commission. So clearly there was a lot of corruption, because every step of the way, until it got to the Home Secretary, until it got to a select committee, the highest form of investigation that the UK can actually have, which doesn't involve criminal investigation, nobody was doing anything about it.
People were trying to get in the way.
It was avoided. So there were a few whistleblowers who were listened to, and even for Victorian sensibilities, this is considered beyond the pale.
That's incredible.
So this was 1840. So this doesn't mean the workhouses went away.
No, but it means that they just came under a bit more scrutiny.
Yeah, and the Poor Law Commission, there were various recommendations made to try and revise it. But this was how obscenely bad they treated some, and this is way beyond anything which Dickens could write about, because nobody would believe him. I mean, you can all read the news, but you can't really have Oliver Twist, poor orphan child, sucking bone marrow out of a bone.
It's
This
not
is just,
good reading.
Please, sir, can I have some more? It's not.
That's dramatic.
Yeah,
It's,
and here's
pulls
another
on the
bone.
heartstrings
Yeah.
rather than horrifying.
So gruel was bad enough, but trying to extract bone marrow from a bone in order to actually just live it's kind of beyond comprehension to be that hungry.
My understanding of McDougall was, as well as like skimming off the top, he was also funneling a lot of that into feed not just his family but also his livestock.
Oh, that explains a lot.
So
he's doubling down on the farm as well.
Exactly. It was more than just saving the money. It was trying to make a second business out of it.
Old McDougall had a farm.
Yes.
And on this farm it went, well, graft. So not exactly a redeeming story, but at least a kind of justice was seen to be done at the end of the day, I guess.
Suppose.
But perhaps we should also look at asylums.
Yes.
I know there's one fantastic story we do want to talk about, but
Everyone likes an underdog, and
Yes.
I think Georgina Weldon is possibly the best example of that.
tell us about Georgina.
So she was described as loud, eccentric, and a spiritualist, to the point where it was inconvenient. You might say, how inconvenient? Specifically for her husband, Harry. So she married in 1860, and within 10 years, they were separated because he couldn't deal with her personality. Now, getting a divorce in Victorian England was astronomically expensive and laborious. You had to go through so many hoops to do that. Alternatively,
We talked about this, but yes.
Yeah.
you could pay a couple of doctors a fat stack of cash and sign an order yourself saying, "I'm so sorry, my wife is insane." And the doctors would also sign that, yes, she was insane. And then you would have approximately 7 days to collect and commit the lady in question. Georgina saw this coming, and she barricaded herself into her own house. It's quite amazing.
Surely only a mad woman would barricade them inside of the
Well,
house.
that just proves the point.
Yeah.
It was even better than that. She fought off the men that were sent to seize her.
The orderlies.
The orderlies. She barricaded herself in the house with the help of her servants until such a point as the committal order expired. And she didn't just like go into hiding or anything like that. She went on the offensive after that.
Good.
She self-taught herself law, represented herself at court, and she sued her husband, the doctors, and the asylum that was going to have her committed. She went after everyone. And the idea of this supposedly insane woman representing herself, cross-examining these gentlemen of high renown in court, it destroyed their reputations. She proved that she wasn't insane. She proved that she was just merely eccentric, and that the orders had been signed in bad faith. And the outcome of this, she was ordered rewarded £10,000 in payment, which she failed to collect because they didn't have the money for it.
Right.
And that works out about £1.5 million
done quite nicely,
in judgment in today's
It's
money.
good that the courts actually upheld her side of things as well, because it was, say what you like about Victorians, they did a good libel case.
It caused massive kerfuffle that if someone as prestigious as her could be whisked away, and if she hadn't managed to stop it, she would have been gone and had no voice. She championed change. She championed the requirement for the evidence of lunacy to actually be reviewed.
Oh, that's incredible. Now that you actually come to mention it, this is on page 7, isn't it?
Yes.
All the good stories are on page 7. So it does actually recall... Yes. So what struck me about this particular case, it is one I remember now, or at least not to the extent that you discussed, but the particular circumstances of how they came to assess it. She ran an orphanage.
Oh.
She ran an orphanage in Tavistock House. Now, Tavistock House, I remember because Dickens lived there as well.
Of course he did.
Yes. Before Georgina arrived. So they took it over. It was part of her inheritance, I believe, or at least her family owned it, I think.
So she had family money.
She turned it into an orphanage. So this was part of her eccentric character. But the doctors that her husband sort of
Paid off.
paid a doctor, they actually sort of arrived pretending that they wanted to place orphans, or they're interested in investing in the school because it was an orphanage designed to encourage children to participate in the arts.
It's
so
very,
singing.
very Mary Poppins.
Yeah, she was very much engaged in the arts. This was bone of contention. This is why her husband didn't like her, because she wanted to go and perform, and of course that would be outrageous for a man of rank. And
Unthinkable.
yeah, and that's why she was obviously mad. But when she was there, she had a pug, which she referred to as a daredevil, and they reported that she believed her dog was possessed by the devil.
That was some of their evidence.
Yes, and the other thing was that they claimed that while she was there talking to them, she saw stars falling from the heavens and all around her. What she actually claims was that at one particular point, she was rubbing her eyes and mentioned that she was seeing stars.
Which, as anyone who's rubbed their eyes will say,
Yes.
it's normal
So
to...
this was the evidence being presented to her. A pug, she believed that her dog was possessed by the devil. as
Factually
opposed to being
inaccurate.
a devil. And stars were falling from the sky. She was just basically rubbing her eyes. But that's how
Probably because she was tired from running an
yeah,
orphanage.
but that's how flimsy it was. And the other interesting fact I remember from her case was the fact that by the time that she passed, she'd lodged 100 libel cases, because this was the only recourse that she actually had to get justice. Until 1882 was the property laws, the women's property laws came in. And until that point, women had no right to the property. So
Right.
not only would her husband have, she she was divorced, before that point, not only would she lost her freedom,
She would have lost everything,
she
her
lost her house,
inheritance,
everything. Yeah, because soon the divorce came through, the property would go to the man. After 1882, she could go ham and just
Wow.
like sue everybody. So I think it's fair to say that she not only got her revenge, she actually helped push back this idea that madness had to be seen in a certain way. And it was 1890, the last Lunacy Act came in, which started to address some of these issues. However, it's fair to say that, well, this is one of my little. When do you think the actual laws were amended to represent something which we would recognise today in terms of
Oh,
care? So 1890 was the Lunacy Act, which massively changed how mad people were treated.
I mean, we're remarkably close to the turn of the century at that point.
Yeah.
Very much.
It wasn't until the establishment of the NHS in 1948
Wow.
that we actually saw state care.
Another 50 plus years later.
Yeah. So 1890 was still very much private,
Yeah.
even though it's kind of semi-state involved, and the care of the mentally ill was being managed in a much more sensible way. But I think it's fair to say that genuine care didn't happen until 1948.
As much as they were privately run, they were subsidised.
Yeah,
which
I mean,
is
you
why
saw-
they were able to charge for.
And there was a
all the
two-tier system.
inmates.
Two-tier system.
Yeah.
If you're rich, you could get a room of your own.
Big
If you're
difference
poor, you had to
between the
make
poor
do.
lunatics
Yeah.
versus the private patients.
But Georgina had a hand in changing all of that, which was phenomenal. Amazing character. Who else have you got for us?
Well, I've got I mentioned it earlier as the potential rainbow at the end of this this journey. This is Richard Dad, or Dick Dad, who unfortunately killed his dad. So Dick Dad's dad is dead because of the dastardly deed that Dick Dad did.
Very well done.
Managed to get through it once. That'll do. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory for him. So
Right.
this was 1842, and he started off as just a regular person, middle class, pretty well to do, and he was selected to go on a tour of the Middle East with Sir Thomas Phillips. So quite a prestigious thing to do,
yeah.
and tourism happened a reasonably large amount at the time.
This is the Grand Tour kind of thing. I mean, that was 18th century, but
Yeah,
this is like when you went round all the sort of the great places of Europe. And
so that you would be well travelled and you could have polite conversation with other people who'd also been well travelled and feel that you
Yes.
were better than everyone else.
exactly.
Unfortunately, he started exhibiting erratic and delusional behaviour while over in Egypt, and he believed he was fighting a spiritual war against Osiris, and Osiris
The
was trying
Egyptian
to
god?
the Egyptian god, and believed that Osiris was trying to steal his soul.
Well, I suppose he would.
In 1843, it became too much for Sir Thomas Phillips, and he was sent home due to his violent mood swings.
Oh,
Made it back to England safely, but believed that at that point he was still fighting the war, and that not only that, he had a divine mission. He lured his father to a park in Kent and murdered him with a knife,
Oh.
believing that that was something that he had to do. Once he was
because Osiris was talking to him.
No, because if he didn't, then Osiris would steal his soul.
Right.
The motivation is
It's complicated.
irrelevant at this
Yeah.
point.
Okay.
But he fled to France and lived there without much incident for a while, and then he tried to murder another tourist.
Oh,
He was apprehended and tried, and he was found to be unable to stand trial in France. They couldn't deal with his mental illnesses, so they sent him back to England for us to deal with. He was found not guilty by way of insanity, and he was taken to Bethlem Royal Hospital and then later transferred to Broadmoor, where he spent the last 42 years of his life.
I thought this was going to be a happy story.
This is getting to be a happy
Okay.
story. Within Broadmoor, they actually tried to give him care. What he had was something that might be akin to paranoid schizophrenia.
It does sound like
in
schizophrenia.
in current terms, and they realised that art was one of the few things that actually anchored him to reality. So
I thought I recognised his name. Yes.
So
the
they gave
artist.
him a canvas, they gave him paints, and they let him express his artistic talent. He showed, so he produced 3 notable pieces of art that any one of our viewers can go and look up. The most notable, at least the one that I'd heard of, was called Puck.
Yes.
But there was another one regarding a fairy gathering that was very, very busy and claustrophobic.
It's quite intense art from what I do remember seeing it, and I didn't realise this was the same man. But
And it kind of gave an insight into the mental struggles that he was dealing with at the time. But the thing that I find most uplifting about it was he found a way of showing that the inmates had humanity. These people, they were more than just a number, more than just an entry in a ledger. They were people that produced beautiful things or could produce beautiful things.
And his art is phenomenal. You can see it. It's part of. He was part of the Royal Academy, I believe. That's where it was first showed.
Yeah.
And you can look it up, and the art is genuinely outstanding. The detail, the evocative nature of it. This isn't just casual drawing. This is by somebody who's genuinely proficient.
And it's quite a stark difference as well to other people that might have been put into asylums, because he had real trouble. So it showed the need to separate out the extreme inmates from the regular criminals or the pauper lunatics. It reinforced the idea that the Victorians really wanted to care for their society, and people could be cared for with the right people at the helm.
Absolutely, yeah. I think this is it's trying to humanise people in those positions, actually showing that they had stories of their own and lives, and they weren't just people to be swept off the streets.
Yeah.
I think, yes, you're right. It wasn't as happy as I was hoping. It's not really the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
He
but
did kill his father, so
yes,
there is
exactly.
that.
And he spent 42 years in an institution. But generally, if you see Richard Dadd's name and you look him up and go and look at his art, there is something very compelling about his artwork, and it is intense, but it's also beautiful. It is genuinely worth a look.
The troubled artist trope kind of resonates a
Yes.
little bit there, but you don't need to kill your father if you're going to paint.
No, well, that's our message for all the young people out there who may be listening to this today. Don't kill your dad. It's okay to just be an artist in your own right. So, on that slightly more uplifting note, what's been another sort of fascinating walk through some of the darker corners of Victorian history, we'll probably end it there this week. But again, it's been informative, it's been educational, hopefully entertaining as well. And we'll move on to deal with yet another topic from this particular era next week. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again, this time next week. Toffs&Toolers, a criminal Victorian adventure, was brought to you by Dreadful Penny Productions. The cast were Mr. Alexander Hudson, Alexander Sweetman Esquire, Shaun Gibson, and Mr. Hugh. The scripts were inked by Mr. Duncan Allwood, with constant interjections from the cast. The producers were Bella Gregory and Rob Morris. Illustrations and scribblings were provided by Mr. George Flett. Studio facilities were provided by the fine fellows of Bison Content London. To ensure a lively performance, Mr. Alexander Hudson was connected to a high-voltage galvanic battery during the recording. While this provided excellent pacing, it caused a minor atmospheric disturbance in Piccadilly, resulting in 3 street lamps glowing purple and a local cat becoming permanently magnetic.